Black and White is a god game released in 2001, which combined traditional elements of the genre with what back then was cutting-edge technical possibilities of simulating artificial life. It pushed many personal computers to their limits with its use of the burgeoning 3D graphics capabilities of the time, and it kinda bit way more than it could chew from a technical standpoint. Now, don't get me wrong, the game is still pretty playable and even enjoyable, but the learning curve is steep and it hides a lot of its mechanics behind world interactivity that you may frankly ignore if you're either not already aware of it or spend tens upon tens of hours playing it and noticing super small details. I will mention some of these in the tips and tricks section later in the video. Let's start with me addressing the graphics. This is pretty hard to look at nowadays. Now, full disclosure, this might also be due to some incompatibility with modern systems, because Black and White hasn't seen a modern day re-release, but more on that later. I'm pretty sure it wasn't as hard to look back in 2001, which I think is literally the opposite if you were to see my 15-year-old self. So anyway, basics of Black and White. You are a newly formed deity, you are represented by a giant hand with which you can interact with the world's objects and creatures. You generally start with a settlement of people under your control, whom you have to impress through your godly powers of flinging rocks over their heads, uprooting and planting trees, giving them resources through either collecting them yourself or using their worship power to cast miracles and make these resources simply appear out of nothing. Because as a deity of unknown providence, not only do you seem to have unlocked the knowledge of creating matter out of energy, but also the knowledge of extracting that energy out of prayers. But we'll go with it because it makes just as much sense as mana does. So you have to take care of your people, make sure their desires for food, wood, expansion and having children are met, and in exchange they will supply you with the resources for your godly powers, which are many. Besides the earlier mentioned resource summons, you can create rain, fireballs, lightning, heal people and a bunch of other things through your divine gestures powered by your people's worship. And the gestures are literally that. Particular symbols which you have to basically draw on the screen with your godly hand in order to activate them. A fairly cool concept from both a mechanical and thematic standpoint. It references the idea of magical gestures from all manner of myths, legends and cultures. The problem is that while indeed a cool idea and pretty nice effects, you can see a color trace as you move your hand, you most likely won't get the gestures right from the first try, and that can prove to be a bit frustrating, especially if you're trying to do something time sensitive, but overall the gestures work. Now that would be pretty cool, but not enough of an addition to warrant Black and White be discussed in this series of videos. Possibly the game aspect, component or mechanic that most comes to mind when talking about Black and White is the creature avatar mechanic. Because you see, as a god, you can have a somewhat anthropomorphic creature be your physical representation on the ground. And most crucially, this creature is endowed with an AI capable of learning from watching your actions in the world, as well as from you interacting with it to tell it which of its behavior you approve of and which you do not. I had never been able to get past the part of the game where you get the creature, because I only played the game on friends' computers and they were never that much into it. So I'd wait for it to install, and this was in ye olde using CD days, so that took a while, and then would start the game and play up to getting the creature, and that would generally be it because we'd go out or we'd decide to hot seat some heroes. And once I finally had the computer capable of running it, towards the end of 2004, I just didn't pop up on my radar anymore. So here I am, 20 years later, finally getting past that part of the game. Let's see what it has to offer going forward. The creature is quite possibly the one thing that sets Black and White apart from other god games till then and since, because it makes a lot of the game not just about you gaining influence over an increasing number of settlements, but it is equally about you training your creature to help you with your purposes, thus making the game that little bit more manageable, hopefully. Creature combat is also a thing, by the way, fairly limited in what you can do, not more than clicking on various parts of the enemy to attack and on your creature to defend, but it is a mechanic that makes sense to exist in the game. Teaching your creature how to act is the one thing that you'll have to spend the most time with initially, till you get a handle on it. There are several leashes you can use on your creature. One will make it docile and nice, one will make it aggressive, and the third will make it curious and more prone to learning. The creature learns by seeing you do things, miracles, actions, and then will do some random things on its own. Whenever you like what it does, you need to pet it. If you don't want the creature to continue engaging in that behavior, slapping it a bit will have to happen. And what's good or bad will depend on the type of god you wish to play. You can be a super chill, benevolent god who impresses their believers through charity, in the vein of the New Testament god.
Thank you, Holy One. No more flooding for me.
Or you can be an angry god who terrorizes their believers, somewhat akin to a raging alcoholic, in the vein of the Old Testament god.
It's what he would have wanted.
Both options lead to the same results in terms of believers. You are guided into these directions by your angel and demon consciousness, which really made me think of Afterlife. And they tend to get extra funny if you're idle for a while, then they show up and do a little jokey joke.
Last night, I dreamt the boss took you off in the 70th minute, demon, and brought on a subconscious. Get it? A subconscious. This is left hemisphere humor. Okay.
But there are some issues I have with the game. Mostly design decisions that both make sense from a flavor and theme standpoint, and also they don't. Mainly the lack of a management UI and a general availability of information. On the one hand, it makes sense to not display a lot on the screen, with the exception of the miracle gestures, because the aim is to create this sense of you seeing things from a god's eye point of view. Cool. Then there's the fact that you can find out some more details about various buildings and things by hovering over them with your hand. Also cool, but this is where it's starting to lose me, because if you are a god, even if you have a limited area of influence as you do in the game, you should be aware of everything that happens in your realm at all times. After all, you hear a creepy voice every time one of your people dies. So this nigh omnipotence is not coupled with omnipresence, which means you can only really administer one settlement at a time, which can prove to be a fairly odd situation since the settlements in Black and White aren't as intricately mechanically set up as they'd be in some other god games or city builders. Your villagers seem to generally do whatever is needed to be done when it is needed to be done. You can assign them to certain jobs or disciplines.
Disciple farmer. Disciple forester.
But with a couple of exceptions of breeders and builders, this doesn't seem to be a hard requirement. They're also not the most environmentally sustainable of people in general. Much of the resource generation will have to either be taken care of by you, by planting and caring for forests, or by building particular wonders. Oh yeah, building things in Black and White is a very simplified process and also a weird one. Your people build scaffolds in the workshop, which can be combined to build various types of buildings. One scaffold can be turned into a basic dwelling, 2 will result in a larger building, 3 will result in a civic building, and so on till you reach 7 scaffolds, which can build wonders. Wonders require a gigantic amount of wood and a lot of stored up belief from your worshippers. The more belief you have, the stronger the wonder's effects will be. Each tribe in the game will have a thematic wonder, and each of them does something different. The Norse wonder, for instance, supercharges your rain, grain, and wood miracles.
Miracle wood.
Norse power.
So focusing on getting it relatively quickly will make your life considerably easier, especially in terms of getting grain and wood. The initial navigation in the game is donkey shit. Moving around the map is a painfully frustrating exercise in constantly confusing trial and error. I spent I don't know how much time trying to figure out some combination of clicks and drags to make my life easier, and I gotta report back and tell you that middle clicking is the best you can do. Who knew being a nigh omnipotent deity would make surveying all that which you control such a pain in the nigh omnipotent dick? There is a solution to this problem, which I'll detail in the tips and tricks section. There's also a bare bony story. You are introduced early on to a very angry and powerful god called Nemesis, who is trying to become the sole god, and you'll have to travel from land to land, gaining power, knowledge, resources, and growing your creature to be able to eventually fight Nemesis. That's not that interesting, to be honest. What is cooler, however, is that there are various quests strewn about the lands which you can engage in for various benefits. These tend to be fetch type quests or various puzzles.
A sheep. Oh, lovely. Sheep have many uses, and the voyage is long.
So now cometh the question, what maketh a video game a classic? Some would say it's subjective, some would say it depends, and there's definitely something to be said about subjective classics, which is something I talk about in this series as well. But in order for a game to be an objective classic, it has to be considered to be good over a period of time, has to be remembered as such, and also it has to stand up to current day scrutiny. And I also consider that 10 years is the minimum period required for such a hindsight-based judgment to take place. In this case, it's been at least 20, so we're cool. Black and White was insanely big at release, praised by both critics and players for its artificial life simulation, graphics, unique approach, and depth. Maybe a little bit too much, because I seem to remember the game going through a bit of a re-evaluation a couple of years after its release, and it being taken down a couple of notches. An expansion, Creature Isle, was released in 2002, and a sequel, Black and White 2, was released in 2005. And since then, there has been nothing new coming from the series. The sequel was ported to the Mac in 2009 and released on the Mac App Store in 2014, and nothing since. Not only that, but there is no way of playing Black and White currently unless you still have it on discs. There is no digital version to buy anywhere, nor has there been any sort of official remaster that would allow the game to be enjoyed on contemporary screen resolutions. Thankfully, the community around the game has been keeping strong for all these 20 years, and there are some useful unofficial fan patches that will help with that. Where did I play the game, since I haven't had an optical drive in years? I'm glad that you asked. I got it from myabandonware.com, where you can find both a disc image and a RIP version. But more on that in the upcoming tips and tricks section. Despite my gripes with the navigation, which I'll clear up later, the game is still fairly playable nowadays, even if not exactly what we expect from modern day games in terms of UI and information availability. Considering all of these things, I can easily say that Black and White is definitely an objective classic of both the god game genre and video games in general. And now, onto the tips and tricks section of the video. Since I just mentioned getting the game from myabandonware.com, if you choose the RIP version, you might have some issues applying the unofficial fan patch, and it also doesn't have music, but you can fix that last part by downloading the disc image, mounting it, and copying the audio folder from it into your RIP version. I could not manage to install the disc version of the game, but on the other hand, I also didn't spend a lot of time trying to do so your results may vary. You can fix your navigation by mapping the keys to WASD. I only knew I could do this thanks to someone coming on my Black and White stream and telling me I can do it. Related to this, you should totally look at the keyboard shortcuts for the actions in the game. It will make your play experience so much smoother. This same stream visitor also told me to use Alt+2 in order to speed up time. And if I've known that from the beginning, I could have gotten so much more diverse footage for this video. Depending on how many people you assign to being woodcutters, if any, you will notice that you might have an ecological disaster on your hands pretty quickly, since your people aren't big on replanting. You can obviously take the responsibility and miracle up enough wood for them, but you can also start growing your own forests as a sort of personal relaxing minigame within the game. And there are a couple of things you need to know. First of all, there is such a thing as soil fertility. How can you tell which soil is fertile? Well, that's a bit of a bitch. You have to look at the color of the dust that goes out of the ground when you plant something in it. If the dust is brown, it's not very fertile. If the dust is green, it is fertile. So aim to plant them in areas with green dust. Now, trees drop seeds when it rains on them, which you can easily do with your miracle powers, but here's a super crazy thing. For whatever reason, more seeds will drop if you stagger your rain by tapping your mouse button every few seconds.
Norse power. 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 Norse power.
I don't know why that is, don't ask, I just enjoy watching the forest grow by occasionally tapping the mouse button. Tell me in the comments what are your memories of Black and White, looking forward to reading them. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it wherever you think it would be appropriate. I'd also appreciate it if you consider subscribing and then clicking that bell notification button. That last part is super crucial for small channels such as my own. I also have a Patreon page for those of you so inclined. Please go check that out. I've been Steve Nonsense. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day and see you next time.